Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. As you can probably guess from the title, this week's video is going to be about speaking. I can be painfully shy when I have to speak to people I don't know, and for a long time I have been in denial of the importance of speaking my target languages. There are lots of language learners that advocate the importance of speaking, but I had always thought, there must be other ways to improve that are just as effective. So I tried everything else except speaking. And it got to a point where I felt not speaking my target language was holding me back. So I finally decided to step out of my comfort zone and started to speak. First of all, let's talk about why we should speak our target languages. Personally, I find it far easier to remember a new word if I have encountered it in a conversation rather than in a book or in a video. In addition, we have all learned our native language through communication. In fact, social interaction is essential when it comes to our language acquisition. A study conducted by Patricia Kuo involved a group of 9-month-old babies who grew up in an English-speaking environment, and they interacted with a tutor who spoke to them in Mandarin. In a month's time, these babies were able to discriminate between different tones, whereas babies who grew up in a monolingual English environment could not. In a follow-up study, another group of babies was shown a recording of a tutor through the television. And this tutor on television said exactly the same things as the tutor in the previous study. The only difference was that there were no social interactions with this second follow-up study. And after 4 weeks, these babies could not discriminate between different tones in Mandarin. This suggests that social interaction is essential in language learning. A mere exposure of the language is not enough. And I do think adults are different to babies in the sense that we can motivate ourselves to learn a new language without any social interactions. And many people do learn a language without social interactions. For example, if you have ever studied Latin, you can learn the language without ever speaking it. But the question is this learning method without social interactions the most effective one? If you are too scared to speak your target language, I can understand you. My first tip for you would be to just talk to yourself and preferably out loud. You might think this sounds silly, but talking to ourselves helps us get used to the pace of speaking. Having a conversation is very different to writing, listening to a podcast, or reading. You can always look up words you don't know when you're writing. You can always go back and listen to the same text again, and you can always read the same sentences over and over again. But one of the things that makes speaking or having a conversation so scary is not having enough time to process what we want to say. So I will highly suggest talking to yourself just to get used to the pace. I will suggest talking out loud instead of just forming sentences in your head. When you only form sentences in your head, it is very easy to forgive yourself for not knowing a certain word or not being able to pronounce a certain word, and it's very easy to just skip that word in your head. But you are less likely to do that when you talk out loud. My next tip would be to record yourself speaking. And I don't mean write a script first and then record yourself. I mean, turn on the recording and just talk about any topic that interests you. When I am recording, I feel more pressured to not leave too many blank spaces between my sentences, and this forces me to speak at a pace of a normal conversation. There is, however, no pressure if you do find yourself struggling to find the right expressions and needing time to process what you want to say. If these silences usually stress you out in a conversation, don't worry. Your recording isn't going to be heard by anyone else but you, unless you choose to share it, of course. If you're still anxious about speaking, my next tip would be to think about how you feel when someone is speaking your native language. And perhaps they don't quite use the right words, perhaps their sentence structure sounds a bit off. How do you feel? Chances are you are still impressed that they've put in the effort to learn your native language. And I bet you don't look down on these people or judge them for making mistakes. Remember, this is also how natives of your target language feel about you speaking their language. So don't anticipate and fear a judgment that doesn't exist. Now let's talk about how you can actually start speaking your target language if you don't yet feel ready to have spontaneous conversations. If you're taking a group lesson and you would like to sharpen your speaking skills, you can ask the people in your group if they would like to do a video call, for example. There is no harm in asking. The worst they will say is no, and if you never ask, the answer is no anyway. Chances are you are all on a similar level, and sometimes this can make the experience a bit less scary. So I started doing a video call with a few people from the German module I took at university. And sometimes we would pick a video or a podcast episode for next week's video call so that we have something specific to discuss. I will highly recommend doing this. Or if you prefer to practice speaking in a more relaxed setting, you can simply have a casual conversation. Another thing that helps me to build up my confidence to speak is the lessons I've had with a language tutor. So you can find very affordable lessons on italki. And if you can commit to regular lessons, that's great. If you cannot, that's also not a problem. You will be surprised that even just a few lessons can help you tremendously. A language tutor is simply there to help you get better, and they probably have had experiences helping students just like you. They are not there to judge you. They are not there to compare you to others, and they are just there to help you. Speaking your target language is a very rewarding experience. The first step is often the most difficult one, so don't get discouraged if your first conversation doesn't go as well as you have hoped. Once you have stepped out of your comfort zone and begin to speak your target language, you will build up your confidence and it will all become easier. That is all from me today. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you get anxious about having to speak your target language and what has helped you to overcome this anxiety. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more language learning tips.